So, all right. Welcome everybody to JFH Hero Meetup 20, our 20th Hero Meetup. This is a huge deal that we're here now, and we might actually be a little bit more like over 20, but we'll keep it 20 here. When we started counting a few months ago. But this is a really special commemorative Hero Meetup because what we're doing today is we're really starting to focus on each one of these meetups and the theme. And today being our 20th, we wanted to really bring something valuable to the community when it comes to clarifying what we do at Justice for Hire and where we draw inspiration from, which is from everywhere in real life and in movies. And we are producing a show together. We are building a cinematic universe together. But we've been confused for a real life vigilante app in the past, and that's not what we do. We're actually making a show. This is entertainment. It's actually more like near future sci-fi. But we do recognize, especially with Real World, the production company, that our tech startup that's producing this, we believe that making movies and shows with the world is the future. So part of that is also recognizing what the tool for storytelling is, what cinema is. And it really does influence how we live our lives and how we perceive the world. And we can learn so much from it, and we learn so much from each other's stories. And because we were confused with the Real Life Vigilante app, it's been amazing to see how many real life superheroes come to the Justice for Hire world, the universe, our community, and say, hey, I get what you guys are doing, and we know it's a show, we know it's fiction, but we want to be a part of it too. And that has been massive. It's been massive for us as a team. It's been massive for the community. And today we want to highlight one of those heroes. Real life superhero Code Gray is with us today. And that's what this Hero Meetup is really about, is getting inspiration from his story, him sharing with us the experience, Code Gray sharing the experience of being a real life superhero, and how we can draw inspiration in our own origin stories as fictional heroes, and even in looking deeper into our own hearts and minds and souls, and what that means for us actually coming together as a community to make the world better. So without further ado, this is Code Gray, and thank you so much for being here. And we'll have questions for the end for you.
All right.
All right. Well, Code Gray, I'd love to start it off with just asking you what first brought you to JFH, and then we can kind of backtrack from there, because you came in with a lot of narrative. You came in with a lot of personal story, and when it was, you can immediately feel it. So what brought you to JFH, being a real life superhero already?
I mean, honestly, I just saw it and was like, I've been looking for opportunities to act with sort of a small time thing that would allow me to be part of something bigger, because acting has always been one of my passions. So I'm going to take this mask off because, like, to clarify, when I'm patrolling in real life, I don't wear that thing. It limits my periphery so much. That's just a character thing. And also, my community does not know me as Code Gray. They don't really know me as anything. I just kind of walk around and see what happens, to be honest. But yeah, so, I mean, yeah, as I was saying, I wanted to act as a thing where I could get away with being an amateur, but also be a part of something bigger. And, I saw the people getting involved with this, and I was like, wow, this is a really good opportunity. So that was mainly what brought me into JFH. And then also it's what allowed me to get to know Arachnoid and Lynx and Widowster and so many other real life superheroes that I would not have met otherwise.
That's amazing. So I think it's really interesting, and I find parallels in my own journey as a martial artist and as a filmmaker, producer, etc. When you say that you're not really known by anything in your community because you walk your own path, even though you're associated with the community to an extent, you very much are your own entity. And so if you could share a bit of your real life superhero origin story with us, we would love to be inspired by it.
Well, the first thing I ever did as a real life superhero, quote unquote, was and I honestly don't really like that term. I just prefer to myself as an activist, you know. So I grew up in one of, like, you know, the safest communities statistically in the United States of America, especially on the East Coast. And it's the one issue with this area was there were a lot of, like, you know, sex criminals, and the police weren't doing much about it. And I heard about this, like, you know, this group of people that all drove silver sedans that would all, you know, try to get kids into their cars. And one of these guys lived less than a block away from me. So essentially what I did was I just, you know, scared this guy into leaving the area with, you know, I gathered evidence by, you know, like photographing him, videoing him in the act. And then I, you know, showed that evidence to him and got him to leave the area. Now, did that get him to stop doing what he was doing? I don't know, but it was something. It was all I could do, and the police hadn't done anything, and they've been doing this for a while, so I figured that they weren't going to do anything anyway.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
So when you say the police hadn't done anything, do you mean that they were aware of the issues and hadn't taken action yet?
They had, according to one of my friends whose, like, younger sibling was almost a victim of these people, the police kept leaving their tip lines on red. And that is one thing that police in my area are known to do. And, you know, there's a saying that goes, the safest areas are not the most policed, the safest areas are the ones with the most resources. And our area certainly has a lot of resources, which is what makes it safe for the most part. But when the police get used to that, it's like the Roman Empire before its fall, you know. They've grown, you know, kind of complacent, I guess, over the past decade or so. Because when I was a lot younger, there was a mall like 10 minutes away from my house that MS-13 used to control, and now they don't. They haven't for a very long time. But, you know, ever since my area has become more gentrified, the police have become worse at their what's supposed to be what most people think is their job, which, you know, to protect and serve, despite the fact that the Supreme Court has said otherwise many times.
So this is very interesting to me. So what was the catalyst for you feeling, you know, whether you want to call it real life superhero or activist? What was the catalyst for you to say, hey, you know what, I need to make the change. I need to be the change. I need to take action.
Well, I mean, that was kind of an over time thing. I think especially, you know, realizing that I was queer was part of that, because, you know, that led to me, like, not being every single privileged thing in society. Like, you look at me, I pass for a cishet white man, but experiencing even just a tiny fraction of the oppression that queer people experience. And, you know, now, of course, when I go out in public, I don't pass all the time. I still experience some of that. And just, like, you know, even experiencing a fraction of that was enough to get me to, you know, get out there and start taking action, start protesting mainly. And then especially in 2020, I had a lot of opportunities to protest. So I took a lot of those, and it was, again, it wasn't like a specific event per se. But the start of it was probably me realizing that I was queer.
So over time, I think that's very interesting with the concept of being a fraction. The sensitivity and the empathy required for someone to, I think I honestly, you know, I love what your choice of words. You said that even a fraction of the, and I'm getting some sort of feedback from somebody, I'm not sure, maybe it's even me, but even a fraction of a particular type of pressure, energy, etc. You recognized it as problematic, and also recognized it as something that other people might have to deal with way more of. And so your heart if this is what I'm gathering from your
Yeah.
story, your heart is like, well, hold on, this is, if this is a fraction of it, this is unacceptable for anybody. And like just a small bit, this isn't good for anybody. So we need to figure this out, and I need to take some action because I'm feeling it, and other people may not have the whether you want to call it privilege or insight, etc., to see that action needs to be taken. So I'm wondering, how has the momentum built for you from that clarity and that very unique, very, very important sense of empathy that I think that a lot of times is often trained out of or at least people are desensitized over time, may not be as responsive to it. So for you to be responsive to that, how has that driven you consistent? Like, where has that taken you? Like that's really the question. Where has that sense of empathy taken you, and how has it evolved over X amount of years that you've been doing this?
So, I mean, I've only really been an activist for the past like 3 or so years. And even back then, my activism was very limited. Because, now I, self-identify as an ANCOM, and I bet when I first started getting into activism, I was, I still thought that I was cisgender. I knew that I was like bisexual or something. And I had a lot of friends that were in the LGBTQ plus community, and a lot of friends who were people of color. And like, there was a lot of intersection between there. So, there were a lot of people getting twice the oppression. And especially since I went to an 80% white high school, that was another thing that started that. But then the way that's led me to become, overall, it's led me to become, I think, a more well-rounded person. It's helped me direct myself in like a way that has allowed me to study more efficiently and prepare for upcoming things like, when you see, I'm gonna mention the insurrection on January 6th for a moment. There had been like predictions of that happening for a very long time. So, being exposed to so much of that had led me to take these kinds of things seriously, because political extremists of all kinds are, when they make a threat like that, it's reasonable to assume that they are being serious. And I guess it's just led me to be able to interpret where, I don't even know where I'm going with this. It's led me to be able to interpret how those beliefs will evolve based on their experience. That's one thing.
So, a new question here. As I've noticed that in the real life superhero community, many of these wonderful hearts and souls that are stepping up and taking action happen to be artists. Yeah. And you've already mentioned that you're an actor. I've seen your music. I know that you connected with Angel Spit, who's producing our original soundtrack, not soundtrack, scoring the entire series. So I'm wondering, what is the connection between the activist or the actor, the person who is acting upon reality and saying, I can make a difference, my actions can make a difference, and the artist, and how that artist manifests as a thespian, as an actor, as a musician, as any form that artist's heart may manifest in. How do those two connect in your mind, from your perspective?
Well, specifically with music, when I engage in activism, I tend to, try to restrict how much emotion I put into it in the act, because I don't want to get carried away with anything. And, because when people do that, I've noticed, especially when white people do that, they tend to speak out of turn. And that's the last thing I want to do, especially when I'm, among, especially like, at an event like a water defender protest or a Black Lives Matter protest, the last thing I want to do is speak out of turn. And so I tend to, just think objectively, think about what my objective is. And my objective there is to, help people, be heard and, help send a message. And then I take the way I process the emotions pertaining to those events is generally through music. Music is always how I've processed things. One thing that really assisted in this, so I was raised by, a dad, by a father who was, is a Baptist, and he was raised by an abusive father. And and so he took a lot of those practices. He never really abused me per se, but he raised me with a lot of toxic masculinity. And that led me to a practice of distancing myself from my emotions. And by 6th grade, the only way I could really process my own emotions was through music. So that's always been my coping mechanism for just about everything. Same thing goes for acting, but that also depends on what role I'm playing. For instance, with Chuck in She Kills Monsters, I was just having fun for the most part. The only things I was really the cathartic thing about playing Chuck was, in his more serious moments, it was sort of the therapist friend type thing, which is, what I've always been in my friend groups. But then more often I've been cast in edgier roles like Action in West Side Story or Lennox in Macbeth. And that has also allowed me to, explore my emotions, because I'm good at acting like I'm experiencing emotions. But when I'm actually experiencing an emotion, half the time I can't recognize it. And therefore my facial expression doesn't match it at all. I just know how to mimic things because I'm on the spectrum and my mirror neurons are hyperactive.
And that's amazing. What you said regarding just interpreting the emotions through music, it reminded me of Musashi, one of the greatest swordsmen who ever lived, and the poetry he wrote. And just the heart of the artist manifests in so many different ways. You could be a martial artist, but that doesn't mean that is the only way that the art, that whatever the current is, it speaks through you, and it speaks through you in multiple ways. And I think that that's something that, this can easily become a totally different conversation. But in terms of higher power, universal power speaking through people. And I think that's very, very interesting that you say that, and that you're a living example of it. You're here, and Sensei Claus actually has a question for you as well. So I should love to I still have more questions, but I'd love to open it up to, because I feel like this is interesting. Sensei, go for it.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. This is actually more of a comment. If you didn't know, Musashi, aside from being a swordsman, he was also a great sculptor, and today he's one of the most sought after artists in Japanese history. You can find his art in museums now.
Oh.
So I know that's a bit off, but I'm kind of a fan, and I just want to share that.
Okay.
What should I do with it?
You can leave it right there. I have my 6-year-old eating next to me.
Nice.
Great. Good times. Thank you so much, Sensei. But Sensei Claus is also not only JFH cast member, but also a martial arts historian who is consistently bringing really amazing esoteric teachings to at least to my attention. I'm just like, oh my God, I didn't know there was.
Well, maybe it's not that esoteric, because it came up right here,
It's true. And
in a less martial sense, they've said that Van Gogh might have had a synesthesia too,
Well, I think it's amazing how the artistry, the energy that moves through an artist can manifest in so many different ways. And I'm wondering, in terms of connecting the real life superhero experience to the justice for hire, I mean, justice for hire world, what are some of perhaps some of your ideas via your experience, whether as as I would consider you, and we've considered you as part of the real life superhero community, but of course, as a martial artist myself, who is in particular styles of martial arts, but I also walk very much on the outskirts of those styles, such as Tai Chi. I'm not a Tai Chi guy, and that community has its own challenges, especially in America. And I have a lot of love for that community, but I also am doing something very, very different than would be considered a mainstream Tai Chi practitioner. So I'm interested in, with that in mind, from the real life superhero perspective, how does that connect to your story, Code Gray's story, in the Justice for Hire cinematic universe?
Well, so, I mean, what I did with, so the character Code Gray, for any like real life superhero type approach to creating a character, especially in JFH, I recommend using like a catalyzing event. That's the thing with most superheroes. I feel like there's always a catalyzing event. There's like one thing that starts the rising action, in a basic plot structure. But Code Gray's story is honestly like the way he gets into it is very different from the way I got into it. Because like the way he gets into it is, he's just a guy who gets into winds up getting into a lot of fights, and then eventually he gets into he gets into a fight and he gets severely injured, and this mobster bails him out, pays his medical bills, and then it says like, you can do a certain number of jobs for me through the app. Like, I'll hire you through the app to do jobs for me. So it's like, clean. And once you do a certain number of jobs for me, your debt's paid. Which of course is not the case for me in real life. I'm not involved with any gangs, but fortunately. But yeah, I think that the main thing that I've played in that has played into like Code Gray in terms of like, the connection between myself and the character is certain aspects of personality. Because you see, I'm a system. For all of you who don't know what that means, when a person experiences trauma at a young age, it can cause their brain to develop improperly, and it can cause them to develop like, multiple entities to put that trauma onto so that they don't have to process it themselves. And so I based Code Gray mostly off of my alters. And, so you've got different aspects that I would have had that I probably would have had I not experienced trauma at a young age. And it's just kind of me imagining what I would be like if I hadn't experienced some of the things I had experienced.
That's a really, really wonderful word choice there, especially when it comes to your alters. And I love the narrative. I'll say that I love the narrative of Code Gray. I love the clear differentiation between your personal real life superhero experience and the character that you play in JFH. And it's very obvious your background and history working not only as an actor as a storyteller, because that's really wonderfully developed. That being said, the concept of alters, and this is something that I think is really, really important for the community. I love sharing this on these types of meetups. There's a wonderful book called The Alter Ego Effect by Todd Harmon. And am I looking at it right there? It's not. It's in Andre's room. But it's a fantastic book. I highly recommend checking it out or getting the Audible. I've actually reached out to Todd and told him about what we're doing, the author. But really, really amazing stuff when it comes to high performance, or to and how anybody can make changes in their lives, and how any one of us might be at any particular time living in an alter ego state, and how when we show up to a particular arena, quote unquote, in our lives, a space in our lives, we show up as a particular version of ourselves. And you can either do it intentionally or you can do it unintentionally. But it's going to happen one way or another. And so I think it's really, really interesting that choice of words, primarily because of how we communicate with each other in JFH, within character or out of character. That's something that if you're on the app, if you've seen the app lately, that's an operational part of the cast chat feature, where you can just toggle between talking in character and out of character and really drawing the lines. I think it's super important for us to consciously to consciously be able to say, hey, you know what, right now I am, I play Jan both in character and out of character. Both characters are my real self, and my character Jan both have the same name, which causes challenges for me at times. But I have to be able to, at least internally, be able to draw a line. And I'm wondering for you, and it seems like you've done it more clearly by saying Code Gray is my character name. Outside of that, I'm not known perhaps by anything. I love the Instagram handle. Hope I'm not doing. Stop me if I shouldn't be sharing it. But Max. Okay, I won't share it. I saw the hands. Your sound blanked out. I saw the hands. But your Instagram handle and the naming of it is so.
It's all.
Say it again.
I said it's all good.
I keep on losing you after it's all, but I assume it's good.
Oh, it's
Okay, cool. But man behind the mask, I love that, and I just so I think it's just really, really interesting stuff, and I'd love to open this up to any heroes on here right now that might have some thoughts, ideas, questions. AK Wonder.
Yeah, I was curious. Because you said that your alters are based on, what your life would be like if you hadn't experienced some of the things you've experienced. And, I haven't read the alter ego effect, but one thing, Jan and Andra have expressed to me is that, part of the beauty of building an alter ego is to kind of step into a new version of yourself that has released some of the perhaps trauma or challenges that you might be experiencing in your life. So I'm wondering if what the positive effects like you've experienced by playing out some of these alters that you say, are what your life would be like if you hadn't experienced perhaps some of those negative things.
Oh, well, to clarify, an alter it's a psychological term for another entity within someone's headspace if they have a plurality disorder. So an alter is one of the branches that my brain improperly developed after I experienced that trauma. Now, my character is what in theory, what I believe that I would be like if I had not developed alters, and all those traits of my alters were never branched out and all just were one person. And that has given me a new perspective on plurality. If anything, it's also given my alters a new perspective on plurality. Especially since, for all of you who don't know, generally in a plural system, there is generally at least one protector personality. And my protector personality, his name's M. He, since M and I are relatively similar, except, he's just more proper generally and more aggressive in certain ways. It's given both of us insights into how similar we really are and how much and what he developed from, right? Because I'm already a very protective person, and I guess that could be why we were so similar. But and then it's also just given me a coping mechanism to accept that I'm a system, because that took me a while. Yeah, I thought I was going insane for a few years of my life. I actually wrote an album about it. It was my first album. But yeah, no, then I think that
Drop the plug where it is so that people can find it.
Oh, thank you, Ragdoll. Love that podcast. I'm not caught up on it whatsoever. Like I'm like 100 episodes behind. But yeah. Yeah, that's basically what I have. It was a coping mechanism for me. And it really helped me just, internalize and accept who we are today.
Cool. Thank you for elaborating on that.
Yeah, no problem.
So Andra's next, and people are trying to say hi on TikTok and ask some questions too. So I'm now live on there too. So if I don't know how to fully utilize the TikTok, when people want to go live with us, but when they do, if some questions come in, I will let you know. So Andra, please go for it.
Sure. So thank you for sharing all that. And piggybacking on what Autumn said, all what's coming from the trauma into the character, how is that affecting the narrative and the overall the other characters? Because we can be. I'm also like Jen. I'm Andra Roxana. I'm developer in the series, but I'm doing this on 24/7. So there is a very fine line. But when it comes to what you were sharing in terms of the alters, when you're channeling certain things into Code Gray, does it affect the other characters, or you're gonna just expose all of them one by one in the series and in the whole narrative, helping Code Gray's story develop and also the other characters as well? That was my question.
By other characters, do you mean like other characters just within my own series, or like other heroes that I'm collaborating with? Sorry, I didn't. I lagged for a second.
Both.
Okay, yeah. So as for other characters, I mean, with the characters that help Code Gray, like the supporting characters and other protagonists, I feel like a lot of those are going to be just based on people that have helped, like based on the traits of people that have helped me get through various challenges in my life. And the antagonists, honestly, a lot of that is just fan service for myself because, as much as I know it, because I know it wouldn't be right to go out into the real world and inflict violence upon the people who've wronged me. So doing that through a fictional series is a great coping mechanism, I've found. It's very cathartic, And as for other heroes, I'd love to collaborate with other anti-heroes and other edgier characters if I get the chance, or other characters who try to I guess get Code Gray to change his ways, because I mean the way I've written him, he is kind of brutal, but is aware of that brutality and wants to change to an extent. So I feel like that would be an interesting interaction, especially between some of the more virtuous heroes within the chat, or in my opinion, the best villains are the villains who have better motives than the hero. So if there's a villain who is able to call Code Gray out on all of these things and really make him think, that would be interesting.
So Code Gray, you just brought up a really wonderful, thank you so much for bringing the conversation here. But essentially how the concept of us being a cinematic universe that, yeah, of course, we're not going out and really, beating up people. We're making a show. It's fictional. It's near future sci-fi. But because sci-fi is essentially what helps to shape our future, whether you believe the world is going in a great direction or not, there's sci-fi that you can look to help visualize that future. We have cell phones because of Star Trek. Star Trek was the first place cell phones were seen in mainstream. And there's so many medical breakthroughs that have happened because of Star Trek and other breakthroughs as well. So when you have this wonderful genre called sci-fi, and our Justice for Hire cinematic universe is so focused on being in the now, but a few days in the future. We call it 5 days in the future sci-fi. We're near future sci-fi. So we're in a position where social media has put us into a place of desired transparency, where we, at its best, social media allows us to see each other in a raw state. We see the process, not just the result. You know, I just wrote a email and blog post a few days ago about comparing Jay-Z's words about you know, people emulate the process. This is an interview from not the process, the result. This is an interview from a few years ago, and he's saying, like, people don't emulate the process, they emulate the result. The end result is what they see, and they emulate that. I think things are different now because of social media. I would disagree with that statement, because I feel that people share, again, social media at its best, they share the progress toward the goal. And when you see someone, I just changed my training routine this past week because of The Rock, because I love The Rock. So, you know, I'm like, well, that's a great idea, Rock. I'm going to change my process. And this happens all the time. People are emulating their stories on Instagram, you know, are essentially like little progress reports. So when you share these things, people start doing something similar. And as we are working toward a world of transparency and looking at this near future sci-fi playground that we have to call Justice for Hire, we need to start thinking about how our stories and how can actually shape a better future. And in the midst of shaping a better future, through the lens of the real life superhero, and I think you and I were discussing this yesterday, Code Grade, as we were preparing for this, the concept of essentially, I forgot the terminology, but essentially, like, you can take someone and you can punish them like immediately, or you can rehabilitate them. You know, there's the concept.
Exactly.
And I'm interested in you expanding upon your perspective of the difference between the two and how we could work toward a society that rehabilitates versus ones that essentially punches their problems away. And that's coming from me, a guy who loves to punch and kick as a martial artist. I love punching, kicking, and throwing. I think it's totally appropriate and awesome. But it's not the way we're going to solve all our problems. You know? So I'm interested in your thoughts on this.
So as a person who has gone through quite a bit of abuse, my take on abuse, and this was not my take for a while, I've got to admit, because I had a lot of anger and I thought that the only way to get back at the people who had wronged me was, you know, in ways that were socially or physically harmful, you know? And what it took me a long time to realize was that rehabilitation is the most painful punishment, because if somebody, and like I've felt this as a person who has made mistakes in their life, if somebody truly, like, you know, is a bad person at one point in their life and let's say abuses someone, and if they grow and change, if they have the opportunity to grow and to change, then they will look back on themselves once they have completed that growth, or at least like a stage of that growth, and realize just how horrible they were. And there is nothing more painful than that, let me tell you. So, but if a person never gets the opportunity to grow and change and evolve, which prison doesn't allow most of the time, prison does not allow that. Matter of fact, I'd say like 99% of the time, our prison system never allows for that kind of thing. It doesn't allow these people to change, and they never actually realize that what they've done is wrong. Like, they may realize that it will get them in trouble, but they may never realize that it is wrong. And then half the time, of course, with the prison system, a lot of the things people do aren't wrong. For instance, you know, marijuana offenses, something like Christ. But that's a different conversation.
So I think it's really, really amazing.
Yeah, no,
bringing up the concept of right and wrong, and how, because essentially I think we get to a point where, you know, right and wrong can be based on your perspective, can be based on the color of the glasses you wear, and but there are certain things that would be considered core human values and core morals. And I think that especially as we grow with the Justice for Hire series, we've released 4 episodes up to this point that we consider a starter pack, and just to kind of catalyze some storytelling from our growing community. And we have another 10 plus episodes that are in post-production right now that are really driving narrative. So when it comes to these ideals, because I can feel from what you're saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you're seeking for us to share ideals for what we would all consider to be a better world. But the word choice that we actually that we have to find together, because I don't think it's going to be one person choosing particular words and imposing them on others. I think it's going to be a community actually finding what the true articulation is, and then being able to share that and source that with the community and improve upon it. And so when we're working toward this culture of transparency, a world where heroes are standing up to problems immediately, not because of bureaucracy, delays because of bureaucracy and red tape, but actually seeing a problem, identifying it, and then helping whoever the perpetrator is to recognize the problem and to either self-correct or to redirect the energy away from the point that's the area it's causing problems, so that can be recalibrated and brought back to society as a whole. So that negative energy can be recalibrated into more productive energy, or let's call it, instead of negative, let's call it counterproductive and productive. So I think it's again, we're talking about near future sci-fi. I think the way this kind of, and Andra, I know you had questions, or at least you had your hand up. So I definitely want to bring you in on this. But one of the practical applications of this, especially as a story device that we've touched on in previous meetups, but we still have to expand upon. I really would appreciate your thoughts on this, Code Gray and everybody. But the concept of safe houses. And when we're building a series that's essentially action drama sci-fi, and you have heroes, some of which do citizen's arrest, and that might actually help the police. As a person who's known real life superheroes for a very, very long time, I was closely acquainted with Phoenix Jones, back in his day, and we were represented by the same media agency actually. And Phoenix Jones has I haven't talked to him in years, but I know that there has been some challenges with him in Seattle with the police as well. And when I've only known him to be a good-hearted person who wants to help. So when it comes to inevitable, again, from a storytelling perspective, challenges with the current systems in place, the police, the infrastructures that uphold society as we know it, and some of the challenges that we deal with every day, we as the characters in this fictional storyline, envisioning a new future that could inspire others to make it a reality, in terms of a world where we're working toward greater good, we have to figure out these systems of how we actually take somebody and remove them and place them somewhere where they can get better, and then they can come back out and everything's good. And it's not prison. And one of the concepts has been safe houses. And I think the drama of our series is part of how are people in society going to feel if somebody in their family has done something quote unquote wrong, if a JFH hero has taken that person physically, removed them from the place that they were doing the wrong, and brought them to a place where they potentially have to contemplate. And let's say on one end of the spectrum, they're a monk on a mountain sitting thinking, and another end on the spectrum, they're sitting in someone's basement, and it's dark and dank, and they're being shown the things that they've done, and they have to contemplate and figure out a way to change their behavior quickly, or there could be repercussions. So again, all this is storytelling, all this is fiction, but I'm interested in some of your thoughts, Code Gray and Andra and anyone else, of what is the practical application for helping people transform in this type of cinematic universe that we've created, where there's heroes going out and actually taking action and stopping people from doing wrong.
I feel like the way Code Gray would go about it is if he were to, apprehend someone, he would, Code Gray himself poses as a character, he poses enough of a threat by himself that if he tells a person that he is caught in an act, or knows has done something, if he tells that person to meet him somewhere, he is confident that that person will do so because he knows that they will be too afraid to disobey him. And then in that way, Code Gray will meet that person and just simply have a discussion with them, albeit the tension's going to be high no matter what, as he always keeps that mask on. I think that, it could vary depending on the hero. For Code Gray, and back when I still went by the Veil, I actually the Veil as a character had a safe house type thing, but instead of rehabilitating people, the idea with the Veil is he was honestly more of a villain than a hero. He was an anti-hero of sorts. He would torture people essentially, and that's not what Code Gray would go for. But it's still more of I feel like Code Gray is still more on the harsh side of the safe house idea, because it's more of a making a rather than using a positive a medium that would be perceived as positive by the majority of society to make somebody realize the severity of their actions. Instead, he would essentially make a person feel horrible about what they've done, not necessarily through physical violence, but just by explaining it, maybe sharing a few of his own experiences, maybe sharing maybe mentioning experiences of people he knows without necessarily mentioning their names. It would that could be just at a park bench in the middle of nowhere, or at a coffee shop, or just anywhere.
Okay, so we have three questions. We have Andra, AK Wonder, and we have Lifeline. So and Guru's coming back in. So definitely want to get to each one of these questions. Andra first, please. And I'll mute.
Sure. Very quickly, and thank you for sharing that. In regards to the narrative of the safe houses, it's been said that the best apology is a changed behavior. Would the behavior be in a community, because the influence of a community, would that contribute more to the rehabilitation than an isolated place, in terms of the narrative, and also in real life, what we're building is a community and we influence each other. So in this influence in the world today, where everyone is an influencer, and with the near future sci-fi, I was just curious about the perspective and the comparison between a community that does the right thing according to community guidelines versus a safe place where someone is being removed and isolated. That was my question.
Well, I think that could vary, because you could have multiple people at a safe house at a time, I guess. It could be kind of like a therapy group, depending on the threat levels of the people being taken to those safe houses. One idea that I got from your question actually was, let's say someone does something and that is deemed as wrong, and it is the job of a hero to rehabilitate them. Going out in public with them and sort of being it's almost like making someone do community service, making them do community service, and that hoping that will help them process the severity of their wrongdoing, and just making sure that they won't do that wrong action again.
I just want to interject. I actually love the idea of community service hyper tailored to the disservice that was done. I think that's really, really interesting from a storytelling perspective of, you know, if you get a murderer, you know, like what does the murderer have to do to see the other side of the spectrum? You know, that's actually healing. You know, that's not necessarily about you know, hurting someone more, because we already know they're hurt, which is why they're taking the actions that they're taking. But how do you actually heal, correct, and bring back? So I think that's super cool. Thank you for inspiring that. I also really like the idea of a group of people being in the safe house. Like so a hero, and then when we get into teams, etc. I just love the idea of seeing Code Gray or any one of our heroes go into, let's say, a basement house, you know, a safe house in a basement, and then they have like part of their crew there, and one of them's the therapist, and one of them's the, you know, and it doesn't matter what their age is, they could be like 16, you know. Like, I think that's kind of cool. So really, really interesting ideas. AK Wonder.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, like, I feel like there's a micro instance of this from the series, like, out already that could potentially be expanded on in a cool way. Just the moment, you know, where Dredd, seemingly kind of, you know, a villainous guy, and you convince him really quickly to, you know, be a hero on the app, you know, work with us instead of kind of continuing down this path. And it kind of occurred to me it would be a cool element to incorporate people who have, you know, recovered or, you know, kind of learned from their mistakes to be, you know, having a hand in running, you know, whatever rehabilitation there was. And I think that could be a cool way to kind of explore some of the villains' backstories that, you know, we might not know, you know, through the rehabilitation process that they're, you know, helping other people with. So
that's really interesting. She's talking about episode 4 of Justice for Hire that's out now, but I think that's super interesting of exploring, you know, essentially like former villains and diving deep into that. And, you know, that sounds like its own kind of mini series itself. So
Yeah.
Lifeline, we have a question from Lifeline.
Hello. Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Hello.
Cool. All right. So
Yes.
I really enjoy the safe house idea, but being the kind of person that I am, I really like to pick things apart. I like to sort of test, you know, the logic, test, you know, almost play devil's advocate. So the point, I guess, or the comment, or I guess point of interest I'm trying to raise is due to the divisiveness that seems to, you know, come from just being in a society in itself. You know, from that divisiveness and from that divisiveness stems hatred and distaste, prejudice, you know, you name it. Because of that fact alone, what stands out to me is you could bring 1 million people to a safe house, but some of them just aren't going to want to change. And you can't change someone who isn't going to want to change. So what then? What do you do with these people who you have taken, you've removed the problem from, you know, the situation, or the, you know, the, you neutralize the problem situation, but what do you do then? I mean, Batman took the Joker to Gotham Asylum how many times? And he's still doing it, and Batman still hasn't done anything about it. So that's just all I'm saying. I'd love to hear what you guys have to think about that.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And you know, this is one thing that, like, you know, that type of issue is one thing that I discuss with people a lot regarding homelessness, that because of the way our society is developed, there are, let's say, like 1 in however many hundred homeless people who want to stay homeless because they can't imagine living in a home again, right? And while it's very rare, it happens, right? And so I think that I mean, so in the case of villains who just seem to be unredeemable. Code Gray as a character, he'd just stop caring at that point. He'd stop caring and he'd just say, for your sake, I hope we never meet again. And if they meet again, heroes would never, or whatever villains would do with that.
Hey, if I may jump in here, because may I join in?
Yeah, of course. Good to see
Awesome.
you.
Good to see you too, man. So yeah, I'm digging the conversation because you guys are talking about how can we essentially change the villain at the root level. And this goes into conversation about the environment, right? Because why the villain is like that is because of their environment and their upbringing. And I think that you brought up a good point before about the homelessness, because the same issue exists. And I meditated upon that kind of problem, the root of it, and the solution quite often. And I realized that we just have to kind of create another ecosystem, so to say, and change the environment around that villain to really attack the problem at its root.
So, Lifeline, please.
So a while ago, I think I was listening to a podcast, and I heard someone who had experienced homelessness, and forgive me because I can't remember their name off the top of my head, but who had experienced what it is like to be homeless or houseless, and they said it's like being a part of a different society. People who are walking on the street, people who who you would consider not homeless, pretend that you don't exist. You walk by these people and your eyes straight forward. You're so focused on what you're doing with your day that you forget that's a person right there. That's a person who is sleeping outside. That's a person who doesn't get to shower and sleep in a bed every night. That's someone who needs to fight and struggle or walk however many miles a day just to have food and water. These are people, and I think oftentimes we forget that. And I think it's one thing to say, oh, we need to fix this homeless issue, we need to fix the housing problems, but recognizing the problem and taking action are two completely different things. And I think it's a difficult topic to talk about. I guess I lost the train of thought there.
No,
but
this is amazing, and I'm so grateful for everybody and their thoughts, and Ragdoll, very interested. Anytime if you would like to jump in, we'd always love to hear from you, because we really appreciate all the wonderful contributions you've been making to the community in recent days and weeks. But I think so Lifeline, you brought it up. I want to touch on the homelessness thing for a moment, but I also want to touch on the concept of what happens if someone doesn't want to change, that Lifeline brought up, and especially because we could frame this within the storyline of what we're doing with Justice for Hire, and I think that there are difficult choices, and let's call them difficult choices. Because we all want to help. We all want people to feel good. We want all these things. And some people don't want to feel good. Some people's duty is to destroy. And what happens when you meet someone whose duty is to destroy? And I think that, you have a question? Oh, okay. So I think that's really just a really interesting concept, because there are people that have, because of the upbringing, because of XYZ that's happened over the course of, that's truly ingrained behavior. They are now, that is what they do. And there are difficult choices to make there. And I think that it's going to be very interesting to explore those difficult choices amongst a community of people that want to bring a new way of doing things into the world. But how do you, these questions that we're asking ourselves, that's where the gold is. For like that, the out of character Jan producer hat on It's like this is the stuff that makes our series so interesting. And the questions that we're asking ourselves as a community right now, and being able to expand upon stories like this and have completely different perspectives and still be evolving, because it's the mistakes that we make. We're going to make mistakes, and it's the mistakes that we make that we have to learn from. You have to make the mistake to learn. That's where the drama is, and that's what's going to make it interesting, rather than having the answer right now. So I really think it's just on that one topic, that one side of what Lifeline brought up. And Lifeline, if you want to, I still want to talk about the homeless thing real quick, but Lifeline, please interject.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part there that you just said? I didn't hear it.
Oh, about that I still would like to touch on the homeless.
Yeah. Okay. Well, when you said there are difficult choices, it reminds me of a quote. Are you guys familiar with Thomas Cochrane? No. Okay. I think he once said, freedom is purchased at the point of a bayonet. And that's what rings in my ears when I hear there are difficult choices. I hear, there are people out there, and we probably don't know who they are. Okay. But there are people out there who are down in the muck, who do the things that no one else wants to do, who sacrifice their humanity, who sacrifice themselves, their time, their freedoms to make sure that we have those things. And it could be in any kind of facet, but I think it's really important to remember that at the end of the day, when you want to fix really big problems and really big issues, when it comes down to those difficult choices, sometimes sacrifices have to be made. And, it goes from a soft touch to a bald fist, and that's just the reality of things. That's just, I don't know, just my comment.
Well, I think it's really interesting. I mean, again, I think that it's us being able to ideate a system of core morals and values that will help keep us on track, so ideally, like no one, and I'm really speaking, within the story world here, so that there's no one that goes off the hinges and just all of a sudden it says, this is what's required. Take them all out, like ideally, and for the sake of drama, we may need characters like that so that we can band together and actually stand up for those morals and values in a new way, and be innovative with how we share these concepts of constructive rather than destructive actions. And so I think that's the drama, and that's the magic of the storytelling that we're all a part of right now. But I wanted to touch on one more thing here that both of you guys were touching on, and Vintage as well. Just an idea that came in India. I'm not Indian, but I grew up around a lot of Indian culture. You have the sadhus, and the sadhus are holy men. And perhaps women as well, but mostly known as holy men that walk the countryside in pilgrimage. They have no homes per se. They sleep. They're ascetics. They sleep in the wilderness. They have no jobs. They are given alms. They're given food throughout as they make their pilgrimage, and they are considered a very important part of society. As beggars asking for food, simply with their hands out, they're considered, and there's fundraisers. Because of COVID, there's been issues with people actually being around to feed the sadhus. I just saw a commercial for this, on YouTube a month and a half ago. They're like, please, donate so that we can feed the sadhus, because people aren't traveling as much, and therefore the sadhus are not getting fed as much. But I think it's really interesting with the concepts of what a society instructs you to believe is appropriate or inappropriate. And in our society, we believe, okay, to be a productive member, the concept of homeless means that you don't have home, and that is bad. That must be a bad thing. You don't have home, that must be a bad thing. And our minds go to that. And not without necessarily knowing, without us necessarily having a dynamic perspective of what it means to either be free from a particular space over your head, or to be attached to a space. I think that we're thinking very linearly when it comes to these ideas. And the only reason I mention this, because obviously homelessness in the United States in particular is a serious challenge. And it is a scary thing to contemplate if you've ever been even close to the line of I'm an entrepreneur. I've had challenges in the past building what I've the things that I'm associated with, that we're associated with now, where I'm like, oh my God, I'm running out of cash. I may not be able to to sustain a home anymore. Like this is stuff that I personally have gone through, and these are scary places to be within the context of the society that we're in. But when you start to broaden the perspective and say, hold on, maybe the things that we're holding on to are not necessarily the things we should be holding on to, that's when you can start to reorganize in the mind and in the heart. And I think that that's really, really important place for us, as a community to at least be cognizant of is possible when it comes to whatever challenge we deal with, whether it is addressing the concepts of homelessness, whether it is, if it's us putting ourselves in other people's shoes, is to not just look at the information from point A to point B, but to actually say, well, hold on, there are different ways of organizing, of seeing something. And perhaps we're looking at it from a way that is limited, and how can we change the perspective to change the way we're seeing this thing. So I wanted to share that with everyone, because my heart goes out to anybody who's either going through the challenges where they don't have something, or the people who have gone through the challenges to actually be at the top of the mountain, and because that means something too. That is a very special place to be, and the amount of challenges that it takes to get to the top of a mountain is something that every soul actually has to go through in their own way. So we can learn from each other no matter where we are in society and how society views us. That being said, are there any? Please. Go, great. It seemed like you had something to add there.
Yeah. So to add on what you said about like how we perceive homelessness, the reason that homelessness is perceived as bad is because of the way capitalism affects homeless people. It would be fine to not have citizens in order to have cheap labor, and it would not be a bad thing to be homeless if people were willing to provide for people who did not have homes. And the people who are defending our current wildlife reserves are mostly indigenous people who oftentimes live in ways that most people would call quote unquote decivilized. And this does not always involve having permanent homes. So I feel like the reason that we view homelessness the way we do is largely due to the negative consequences of industrialization and capitalism. And I feel like the more we view things from a lens that is not based on your people's worth being what they produce, and more just the fact that they exist and are a human, the more we view things from that lens, the less we as a society will stigmatize things that we would normally consider to be out of the ordinary. And once those beliefs get into a system of government, eventually there won't be as much of a need for said system, because if people are able to provide for each other just because they are people, and people inherently have worth and dignity, at least that's what I believe, there is as long as we're able to provide for each other in that way, which is very possible, it's just that people don't do it because it's not profitable, the world will be a much better place. At least that's what I think.
Well said, man. And thank you so much, everybody. Across the board for being here, and Code Gray. If there's any other questions, Code Gray, I will say that Guru Merkaba, who's here, did express that you guys might be wonderful counterbalances for each other character-wise. I think Jay Edward is just coming in as well, but this is very, very special every time we do this, and it's very special for this to be our 20th Hero Meetup, and to do it with all of you and with Code Gray. Thank you so much. Code Gray, is there any other closing statement you'd love to leave us with in terms of anything in particular, whether it's related to the RLSH community, JFH, or anything that's in your heart that you want to leave us with?
Just one thing in particular that's just kind of a universal message that, like, ever since I heard this at a JFH Hero Meetup from you, actually, I am, and from it was like a conversation between you and Sudden KO. It's that violence is a violation of somebody's rights. Any violation of somebody's rights, that is violence, and defending somebody else's rights from a violation of like their rights is not violence. If anything, this is like the main thing that you brought up, and that really stuck with me. It's compassion from a Buddhist perspective, because you are doing the right thing without hesitation. And just like I don't know, that's just one thing I'd like to, for anyone who was not at that Hero Meetup, which I'm sure is plenty of you. That's just the one thing that I'd like to leave y'all with, because if you all take that into consideration and carry that message out into the world with you, you'll make.
You just gave me chills. So thank you so much for reminding us of such an important message. Thank you so much, man. That really means a lot. That means a lot to hear that back, because I remember when I first heard that, that gave me chills, and it really made a lot of things in life that I care about make sense. So thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being here. We have Code Gray, we have Lifeline, we have Andro, AK Wonder, Sensei Claus, Guru Merkaba, Vintage, Ragdoll, and we have Jay. If you're a hero, or if you're part of the community, or if you haven't joined yet, we're happy to have you. You can always join if you haven't already done so at justiceforhire.app. That goes for everybody, and we love you guys. We'll see you next time. This will be on YouTube within the next 24 hours. So if you've missed it, you'll be able to watch it again. So love you guys, and more is coming from the Justice for Hire universe. So just follow and be a part of it, and we love you. Thank you guys, and press stop on this.